Good morning. This is English 8 for Thursday, March 19th. I already forgot what day it was. March 19th, okay? Turn in your book to page 195. As you turn into your grammar book on page 195, let's review for a moment. Adjectives describe what? Nouns and pronouns. What are my 5 adjective questions? Which one, what kind, how much, how many, or whose? One more time, say those with me. Which one, what kind, how much, how many, or whose? An adverb describes a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. And adverbs answer the questions where, when, how often, to what extent, and then if it's an adverb phrase, it might tell us why. Again, what are my adverb questions? Where, when, how often, to what extent, and why. Look in your book again, as I said, on page 195. We are going to look for the adverbs in these sentences. I want you to remember that adverbs can be found if they're describing a verb at the beginning of a sentence, at the end of the sentence, or even in the middle of a verb phrase. And they may answer any of our questions. However, if you have a verb, an adverb, that is modifying an adjective, it's going to usually be located right in front of the adjective. If the adjective says beautiful flower, okay, so beautiful is my adjective. If it's an adverb describing that, it's going to say it's an extremely beautiful flower. So extremely describes beautiful, and beautiful describes the flower. So extremely is an adverb, beautiful is an adjective, and flower is the noun. They're usually, if an adverb describes an adjective, it usually tells us how or to what extent, okay? If an adverb describes another adverb, it also will come immediately in front of that adverb. And it's usually going to tell us how, okay? Now, remember, infinitive phrases can also be adverbs, and we're going to talk about a little bit of those today. Look at page 195. We're going to first find our one-word adverb. Then we're going to say, what does that adverb describe? So number 1, he did well on the test. Okay? When you do this, what's the adverb? It is well. Well is my adverb, and it tells me how he did. Did is a verb, so I know that well is an adverb. Look at number 2. The American people did not hesitate after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. What is my adverb? The word not. If you remember yesterday, we learned that there are 3 words that are usually always an adverb. And that is the word to, T-O-O, not, and very. They are always going to be an adverb. So not is our adverb here. And what does not describe? It describes the verb did hesitate. How did they hesitate? They did not hesitate, okay? Look at number 3. Marcia was deeply moved by the beautiful poem. Well, my verb was moved. Marcia is my subject. Marcia was moved how? She was moved deeply. So deeply is my adverb. Was moved is the verb that it describes. Please make sure you're writing these down in your book as we're doing them together. Look at number 4. The lion roared ferociously in the still of the night. Ferociously is how the lion what? How he roared. So ferociously is our adverb, and it describes roared, our verb. Look at number 5. Surprisingly, the tortoise beat the hare. Beat is the verb, okay? What describes how the tortoise was beat? Surprisingly. So surprisingly is our adverb. Notice it's at the beginning of our sentence, but it still describes our verb. After a strenuous day of hard work, Timothy soon fell into a deep sleep. When did he fall into a deep sleep? Soon. Soon he fell, okay? So soon is an adverb telling me when he fell. Fell is what the adverb describes. Yesterday, we went to the beach and fished. We went when? We went yesterday. So yesterday is my adverb and it describes went. It tells me when we went. Joshua happily stood for the elderly lady to take his seat on the bus. Okay, the verb is stood. Joshua stood. How did Joshua stand? He stood happily. So happily is my verb. I know we have done some of these in class already. That's okay. I want us to go over them because I'm not with you. And I want to make sure that you understand this before we get into our new material. Okay? Number 8, Alicia answered the question quickly. How did she answer? She answered quickly. Quickly is our adverb. We slowly walked back to our hotel after a long afternoon sightseeing. How did you walk? You walked slowly. Notice that I'm taking the verbs and I'm looking at those first because that's where most often the adverbs are. I will clean the fish tank tomorrow. I will clean when? Tomorrow. Sounds like a procrastinator. Okay? Tomorrow I will clean it. Okay? So tomorrow is an adverb telling me when. Will clean is the verb that it describes. From the balcony, the queen majestically waved. How did the queen wave? How did she wave? She waved majestically. So majestically is the adverb. Waved is our verb. Look at exercise B. We're going to underline the adverbs and modify the adjectives. Draw an arrow to the adjective that it modifies. And I want you to remember, adverbs describing adjectives come immediately before that adverb, okay, or adjective. Grandma cut Leah an incredibly large piece of pie. Okay, grandma cut. Okay, grandma cut what? Don't say pie because pie is a prepositional phrase. Grandma cut piece. What kind of a piece? A large piece. So large tells me what kind. If it tells me what kind, it is a adjective. Now, to what extent was that piece large? It was incredibly large. And since it tells me to what extent, incredibly is an adverb describing large, telling me to what extent was it large. Look at number 2. The snowfall was unusually heavy for this time of year. Snowfall was. Okay? What was the snowfall? What describes the snowfall? It was heavy. I have a linking verb, so heavy is my what? My predicate adjective. Since heavy is a predicate adjective, I say, to what extent was it heavy? It was unusually heavy. It's intensifying. Remember, adverbs that describe adjectives usually intensify the adjective. So, unusually describes describes heavy. So, unusually is an adverb describing my adjective. Number 3, the puppy was too small for the collar. Okay? Puppy was small. Small is a predicate adjective, right? Okay, how small was he? He was too small. Okay, so too is an adverb telling me how small. The giant sloth is certainly slow. Sloth is what? Is slow. Slow is an adjective describing the sloth. To what extent was the sloth slow? He was certainly slow. Certainly is an adverb describing my adjective slow. Notice that several of these are predicate adjectives. The relatively minor injury was treated by the paramedic. Okay, was treated. Who or what was treated? Injury was treated. Well, what kind of injury was it? It was a minor injury. So minor is an adjective telling me what kind of injury. Relatively describes to what extent was it minor. It was relatively minor, just small. Maybe they just needed a couple of stitches, okay? So it was relatively small, okay? Relatively is an adverb telling me how small. I'm sorry, how minor. Minor is an adjective describing the injury. Patricia is seldom late turning in assignments. Again, I know we've gone over these. Seldom tells me how often is she late. Number 7, we can be very brave because of God's strength. Well, that's a good sentence for this time of life, isn't it? Very tells us to what extent can we be brave because of God's strength, not ours, but God's. Okay, very brave. The Ibex tapestry depicted the Battle of Hastings of 1066 is extremely old and fragile. This I want to point out because extremely is our adverb, and it tells me how old. It's extremely old. How fragile? It's extremely fragile. The word extremely describes both of my old and fragile. Turn your page, please. Look at page 196, recognizing adverbs again. This time, we're going to underline adverbs that modify other adverbs. Draw an arrow to the adverb that it modifies. Karen is almost always the first one to volunteer. Okay, so we're going to underline our adverb that modifies another. It's going to tell us to what extent. It's going to intensify it, remember? Almost always. Almost tells us how often or to what extent. Almost always. Underline almost, draw an arrow to always. Pooh acted quite wisely when he ate too much of Piglet's honey. Well, Pooh acted unwisely. Okay, this is how he acted unwisely. But to what extent was he unwise? He was quite. So quite is an adverb describing the adverb unwise. Booker T. Washington reacted extremely restrainedly to those who ridiculed his work. Have you ever been there? Someone made fun of something you've done and you've had to restrain your mouth? You had to restrain your tongue so that you could be a good testimony? Booker T. Washington reacted how? He restrained, okay? How or to what extent did he restrain himself? Extremely. Extremely is an adverb describing the adverb restrainedly. God can supply our needs more abundantly than we realize. Okay? Abundantly tells us how he can supply. More tells us to what extent will he supply them. More abundantly. So more is our adverb describing the adverb abundantly. Okay, I want you today to do 5 through 8 in exercise C. I also want you to look at exercise D. It says draw one line under an adverb that modifies a verb. Draw a circle around the adverbs that modify adjectives. Draw a box around the adverbs that modify adverbs. It might be wise to go through your sentence and mark them. Mark your verb, your subject, your prepositional phrases, and then do your adverbs. Don't be afraid to draw arrows, whatever it takes to help you know. But make sure you follow your directions of which ones are underlined, which ones are circled, and which ones are boxed. Tonight's homework is page 196, exercise D, and exercise E. On page 196, D and E. All right, have a good day.